So I've decided to get into another project in the first gen Tacoma series. So earlier this year, I finished up my 4x4 conversion on this. So if you're interested in that project, there's a link to those videos. It's a two-part series of me doing all the work to get that swap sorted out. So since I finished that, I've been kind of craving a new project for this. And for me, the most sensible next step was to do a pretty common swap, which is swapping a factory e-locker, so a locking rear differential, into the truck. So my truck is not the TRD off-road package that came on some of the first gen Tacomas, which came stock with the locking rear axle. So I sourced this from a 2004 extra cab Tacoma that was wrecked. The man I bought it from told me it had 220,000 miles on it. So more miles, about 100,000 more miles than my truck actually has on it, but it's in amazing condition. It was from a Southern truck, so there's no rust. The actuator is in really good shape, and he gave me the entire OEM wiring harness, the locking differential ECU, as well as the factory rear locking differential switch that goes up on the cab. So gave me everything to go with it, and what I'm going to be spending time doing is figuring out the electrical wiring for it. There's a number of different ways that people have done it on the forums, which include aftermarket harnesses that just do a complete bypass of any OEM system, tapping into OEM systems. But what I have, I think, is fairly unique in that I have the actual full OEM frame wire harness from the donor truck that he gave me, and I think I can make it work entirely OEM. What I've realized is there's a lot of compatibility already in the truck that I'll get into, but I need to spend time figuring out the wiring, and I'm going to totally refurbish the axle itself. So I was just doing some initial inspection, and I popped off one of the ABS sensors that this rear axle has, which my truck also has the ABS sensors. And what I noticed was there's a little bit of gear oil on the ABS tone ring, which is a pretty good indicator that there's leaking axle seals. So with that, I was initially planning on not doing a total overhaul, but I think it'll be a good learning opportunity for me. And given that it has more mileage than my truck, it's probably a good time to just do it before I install it. So I'm going to strip the whole thing down, do the seals, replace the bearings, repaint it, refurbish it before actually putting it in. And that's going to be especially easy with it off of the truck. So going to do all that stuff first, and then work on getting it actually put onto the truck. So there's a lot of steps for me initially, but what I'm mostly spending time doing right now is figuring out the wiring considerations. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the difference between the locking and non-locking axles. Common question that comes up is, why can't you just swap the third member itself that has the locking actuator on there? And the main reason is the axle housings themselves are totally different. Not totally different, but they're different than the open differential non-locking housings. So while it might seem logical to just swap the third member with the actuator, it won't actually fit properly into the housing. There's some technique that people talk about where you can modify the open differential non-locking housing to accept this third member, but the consensus is generally it's much easier to swap the entire axle itself. So so the TRD model was, again, the one that came standard with the locking model. I believe there were some instances where it was an option on the non-TRD first gen Tacomas as well, but most frequently you're going to find them as just a factory installed unit on those TRD off-road packages. So again, just getting into what I have here. So this is the actual motor and detection switch cable, and the actual actuator itself, which locks the differential when engaged. You might ask also, why would someone want to do this? Well, for me, it's just fun, and I just like working on my Tacoma, and I wanted a new project, but also it gives you a lot more off-road capabilities. So I just did the major job, which is upgrading to 4x4, but an additional added off-road capacity would be to integrate a locking differential. What it does is, in an open differential, the wheels spin at different rates. So that's helpful when you're going around turns. The physics of an arc mean that one wheel is going to spin faster than the other in terms of the inside and outside paths that they will take. But say you're driving off-road and you're stuck. If I have my current truck with the open differential, it's going to send power to the wheel with the least traction. So if that means my wheel with the least traction is spinning, the other wheel isn't going to be helpful at all, and I'm not going to go anywhere. What the locking differential does allows you, once you engage a switch in the cab, it locks the two wheels together. So if you have a wheel that has traction, the power will also be sent to that wheel, and it'll be much easier to become unstuck from whatever situation you're in. So again, this is my daily driver. I'm not making it into a dedicated off-road rig. This is mostly just because I like working on the truck and I like learning about everything, and it gives me a chance to get in and totally disassemble and rebuild something and in theory, you know, upgrade my truck. So that's the main reason I'm doing it. And then talking about, again, some of the parts that I have that, you know, people don't always end up with when they get a donor TRD axle like this. So not everyone ends up with the factory ECU, which is the rear differential ECU that goes in the kick panel on the driver's side, as well as the diff lock button. And then my special addition here is essentially the entire frame wire, which means the rear harness of the truck. So he did end up cutting off a couple of the taillights sections, which I could easily replace, but I have all the major, you know, components, especially the plug for the rear differential, you know, wiring itself. So this is ABS. I think I read that all TRD axles were ABS equipped, which is great for me because my truck is ABS equipped. So I have the ABS sensors on there already. You know, the e-brake cable is all there. Everything is there. So what I need to do is just, again, spend time taking all this stuff off. You can see there's a little bit of surface rust too, but it's really just surface rust. That's totally it. It's in amazing condition considering. So yeah, I need to take some time to disassemble this and really, you know, learn more about the internals. I've already watched a bunch of material on how to replace the axle seals. I'll probably just have to pick up a couple of tools, but luckily from the 4x4 job, I bought a lot of equipment that I'll be able to use for this, such as a shop press. So I should be okay for that. So I raised the axle up onto jack stands just to make it a little easier for me to start taking stuff off. I just took a bunch of detailed photos, so I make sure I, you know, documented where everything was attached on the axle as I get ready to, you know, disassemble everything for cleaning and painting. What I'm going to do first, though, is just open up the fill plug and the drain plug, and just if there's any residual gear oil in there. I actually don't know if he ended up draining this, so just want to see, and it'll also give me a chance to maybe just peek inside quick and see what's going on with the ring gear and stuff. But going to do that, and then I'm really just going to start unbolting everything. Going to try to do it in a fairly methodical way, like replace all the screws where I took them out, so I don't lose track of anything. But the idea is to just get a lot of this stuff stripped off so that I can start cleaning everything up really well. Yeah, so this is actually still full of gear oil. Yeah, so I'm gonna get that drained out. It'll be a good time to just check out the quality. Yeah, looks good. It's not goopy at all. Really just clear. So that's good news. There we go. A little safety pin in there to keep it in place, so I should be able to just pull it out like that. And then this should just push up like that, and this just comes out. There's a little washer on the bottom there too. There you have it. There's the back side of the actuator. Alright, so the only thing that I have left to do now is I'm going to pop off. There's four 14 millimeter bolts, or nuts rather, that hold the axle and the drum onto the axle housing. So I'll zip those off, and then I'll be able to pull the axle right off. I have a lug nut on here just so the brake drum doesn't fall out, because this thing is really awkward and heavy. And then I'm just going to get a board ready to put it on top of for now, as I get my space organized here. But yeah, just going to pull these off first. And then we also have the whole, axle assembly here, so you can see the ABS tone ring, the collars around it, the bearing, of course. There's that O-ring. So yeah, I'll have to see what makes sense financially in terms of what I choose to rebuild and what I choose to not rebuild. I'll also need to pick up that, expensive tool where you can use the shop press to press all this stuff off. So I could try to fabricate it, weld it myself, but I don't know that I really can. I don't have a great welder, so I'm not sure if it'll work. So I might just buy it. But yeah, I need to figure out now what makes sense. But it's just nice to have everything off. I can clean it up much easier, get it ready for paint. I don't want to take too long on this project, so hopefully I can get this done soon. But just nice to have it all stripped down now. So I have decided to pretty much completely rebuild the axle. I ordered all of the seals and the bearings, the spacers, all that stuff. Ordered that online. I also just ordered the rear axle bearing puller tool from this guy named Dwayne in Nebraska. He makes them in the US. So ordered that all in. That was probably about $400. 115-ish of that was the tool, and then there was about $300 on parts too. So not cheap. But with that, if I'm doing the full rebuild, I might as well make it look pretty as well. So I'm currently stripping down all the paint. I initially just started with a wire wheel, but it was not really working super efficiently. So I started using this stuff, which I love. I used this a lot on my 4x4 conversion project to strip paint on some of the old parts like the drive shafts and stuff. But this works amazing. So you just kind of lather it on there and you can see what it does. It just gets right under the paint layer and it just bubbles right up. So it's like pretty satisfying once you actually peel that off, because it just gets down right to the bare metal, which is great. So I've got the pressure washer here. I've got both of the open axle sides, zip tied with a rubber glove here, so no water can get in there. And then the only other place where water could have gotten in is this little port right here for the actuator. So I've got that taped up. And then this is just one of the, this is the detection switch for the actuator. So again, just have that covered up. So that should be the only thing. The breather port technically has, airflow into the case, but that's covered. I didn't put it on the third member. The third member seems to have a different type of paint on it that's a little bit more robust, and I don't know that I'll need to strip it. So I'm going to do my best to not put the citrus strip on that and just see if I can clean it up and then, repaint it. Because it appears to be a more like hardy paint layer. So yeah, so I'm going to get this power washed. I might have to do another round of the citrus strip, but we'll see how it goes. So there's our finished product after the citrus strip. So you can see there's still a few spots, mainly around the brackets and stuff, where I didn't get it. But yeah, I just got some flash rusting, but you can see it kind of leaves some marks behind. It's on the bare metal, so I'll just run a piece of sandpaper over that. But you can see it really works great. I almost have this stripped completely down. It's kind of cool to see all the original welds, all the heat signatures from the original welds and that sort of thing. But the rubber gloves worked pretty good. Didn't have any major water get anywhere. We'll see about the actuator port, but I think the same there, so that worked pretty well. And yeah, let's start to get this wire wheeled down and sanded to get ready for paint. Okay, there we go. Jesus. That was a lot harder than I expected. It's because these two long studs that go through the actuator area, if your angle is off a little bit, you're kind of pulling in a not ideal spot. So that's what happened there. Cleaned up the gears a little bit here just to not have it be so messy as I'm working on it. And I did also count the gears on the ring gear and the gears on the pinion gear, and I do in fact have the 410 gear ratio. You just have to count the number of gears on the ring gear and divide that by the number of gears on the pinion gear. So I have 41 on this and 10 on the pinion. So do have the 4.1 gear ratio, which matches the front diff in my truck. Yeah, so clean this up good. Everything looks in really good shape. The wear pattern on the ring gear and the pinion gear look really even and just good. So no crazy chips, nothing like that. So I'm really hoping that this is, appears to be in really good shape still, and I can just run it as is. I'm not going to mess with anything with the gear stuff unless I have to. But I was just playing around because I was just curious, because right here you can see this is the actuator with this arm for the locking differential part of it. And I was just trying to play around to see how it worked. So I figured out sort of what is happening inside as this locks. So you have this arm here, which the arm itself at the end has a few kind of like rack and pinion style gear slots in it that the actuator itself connects into. So what happens is the actuator spins, which moves this arm inwards when you activate it. So once that is moved inward, now your gears are locked together. I can move this, back and forth just using that. It's like a little like solenoid type thing in here. I don't know if it's exactly how that works, but it almost feels like it has like a catch point to it, like a magnetic almost catch point. So probably is what is happening there, some sort of spring or something. But I was able to figure out that it works because it's hard to see and you can't really tell from this angle, but the spider gears are on this side, and right now it's in the open position, and I can move the spider gears freely with my fingers. When I push this in, where's that? There we go. Those spider gears are now locked. So that tells me that at least this part does work. The only remaining thing we'd have to test is to make sure that the actuator motor actually works and would actually move this arm into position. So, but as far as the gear itself working as intended, this does function the way that we want it to. So that's great. And it was just cool to help me visualize it a little bit. That's partially why I like taking this stuff apart, is it helps me understand a little bit better about what's going on. I didn't really fully understand how the locking system worked on the e-locker axles, so now I have a better idea of that if anything goes wrong in the future. So also just doing a little bit of cleanup work on the gasket surface on the third member. There's just some lightly rusty spots and just kind of has a little bit of a wear on it. So I'm just taking a little bit of 220 grit. I'm just going to follow it with this rag. I have a little brake clean just to keep it clean and make sure I have a good mating surface for the new gasket. Something else I like to do is take a file and sort of deburr any high points on the casting or any imperfections in the casting. I did that a lot on the 4x4 project because these don't always come perfect from the factory, so it's a good time to clean up anything that you see. I've got it fully coated with the Pour 15 now. I'm not too worried about it being a perfect coat. You can see there's like a couple of splotchy areas. This stuff goes on really thick and almost like honey-like, and it tends to slowly drip. So you might think you have a spot nice and even, and then you check back in 5 minutes and there's a big drip coming down. So I've got this mounted on jack stands, and there's a broomstick going through it, so I can rotate it however I need to, which has been helpful because I've just been kind of flipping it over, trying to catch any drips. And I'm just going to keep doing that until it kind of settles. But again, I'm going to top coat this, so I'm not terribly worried about this looking super pretty. Just want to get a base protective layer for the rust. And I need to figure out if I have to use the Pour 15 top coat or if any sort of paint will work. I have some flat black that I'd like to use, so ideally I don't need to spend another $30 on a can of aerosol. Got my parts order in, so I'm going to do a little unboxing. This time I used this company called Part Souq, S-O-U-Q. They're actually based out of Dubai. A lot of the people on the Tacoma World forums use them. I almost always order from my local dealer, but because these were going to be expensive parts this time, I usually try to wait for the 25% off sales that Toyota does on their online orders. But the weird thing about this company is they can somehow make all of their prices like less than half of what they are through Toyota. So I don't really know how. Their shipping adds up to be a lot. Like I think this was like $60 shipping or something insane. But because the prices of the parts are so cheap, I did the math on even if I did get a 25% off sale through Toyota online, this would have still been cheaper to do it this way. Um, so yeah, I can neither advocate nor not advocate for them specifically, other than I did use them before on my 4x4 conversion with success. I ordered a speed sensor through them, which again was like less than half the price that it would have been through Toyota. And they are OEM parts. So, you know, everything looks legit. It comes in, manufacturing, packaging. Yeah, and like I said, a lot of people vouch for them. So I think we should be okay to recommend that. But yeah, so here we got the parts set up. These are the bearings. And just start laying this stuff out. 2 of the bearings. That box is a little beat up. These are, I think, the inner seals. These are the O-rings for the outside. These are the snap rings for the axle shaft. These are the inner boots. These are the 4 spacers. So the spacers that sandwich the ABS tone ring and the bearings. So I got 4 of these. And then my 2 ABS rings. So I got new ABS rings as well. Okay, so we've run into maybe our first fairly significant hiccup here. So I got the press tool from Dwayne. It's very good quality. All the hardware looks really robust. Everything looks good. No complaints there. What I've realized is, and what I thought might be an issue, but to be honest, I just didn't look into it because I was hoping it would work out and didn't think it was going to be that, much of an issue to deal with. But Dwayne's tools are specifically built for the 20-ton press at Harbor Freight and similar 20-ton presses. I have the 12-ton, which I think is going to be more than sufficient for pressing power. However, the support for the press is narrower than the 20-ton press, and Dwayne's tool does not fit through it no matter what configuration you try. I've tried kind of every angle. It's about 3/4 of an inch wider than this support, so it won't fit in there and it won't be able to use it properly. So my options are I could trim the edges of the tool, which I don't really want to do. I don't really want to mess up this nice tool that I just bought. And then the other option is to alter the press sort of support brackets here. So I could either try to find a few pieces of angled iron in the same configuration, but what I think I'm going to try is all these connecting pieces are doing is just connecting the two together. There's no structural support there. It's all based on the compression of this sort of C beam here. So what I could do is cut these connecting pieces off, widen it about 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch. I probably don't want to go any wider than the tool itself, and then just weld in something just to hold them together. I have a piece of 1 inch square tubing that I could just tack in just to keep them flush with each other. I might not even have to do that. I might not even have to add these 2 support pieces. I could probably get away with just having them on there, but I think it just adds a little bit of security so they don't spread apart as you're doing press work. So I think I'm going to do that because this piece feels less precious than this piece to me, and I can always rebuild something like this with an even stronger plate actually in the future. The only thing I need to consider is is there any significant is there any significant, physics consideration I need to think about when I widen this about 3/4 of an inch? The only thing that that's doing is it's spreading out the pressure on these crossbars here that sit, sorry, it's going to sit like this. So if I widen it, I'm putting the pressure outwards on this a little bit more, which I guess in theory, you're getting towards the end of this rod. It's maybe stronger if you're putting pressure in the middle. I don't really know. I'm not terribly concerned about it. I think that'll be fine, but either way, I need to figure out how to get this wider. So yeah, I'm going to try to figure that out, and I'll film whatever I end up doing, whether it be cutting this off, trying to find some more angle iron just to get it done. But it's unfortunately a added time hiccup that I wasn't hoping I was going to have to do, but I just got to get it done and deal with it. So we'll get into that, whatever I decide to do. This is the end result of the widening I did of this press apron. So you can see I just tacked in this 1-inch square tubing. It worked totally fine. It's not the prettiest weld ever, but I just need it to function. There's no structural weight on that at all. It just holds these two together to fit the tool to press the axle out in there. So that worked great. And I think that was a smart solution because I looked into ordering a new C channel to or U channel to fabricate a new one and just leave the original by itself, and it was going to be over $100, I think, from McMaster Car. So this was the best option for me, and it worked out pretty good. I'll throw some paint on there eventually when I'm done with the project, and I'll probably just be able to use this for all my applications moving forward. I'm about halfway through the pressing procedure. At least I have one of the axles pressed out. So while that's the case, I figured I'd do a little side-by-side here. I've also spent some time cleaning up the drum backing and the axle itself. So just wanted to show sort of, everything I need and also what the difference is now that I have everything out. So the axle cleaned up really well. I just used some Scotch-Brite on the bearing surfaces and cleaned it up with some brake clean. So no issues there. Everything came off really smoothly. I did notice that there was some rust on the side of the bearings, which was prevalent sort of like in the housing of the bearing itself that I cleaned up. But there was also a lot of gear oil inside there. So I'm glad I did this because I think there was some sort of leak. But I cleaned that up inside, cleaned up this mating surface with which will mate up with the axle housing end. Clean that up because it looked like this before. So that looks really nice now, and I'll have a nice flush mating surface. Just use Scotch-Brite inside the bearing seat there. Cleaned up the threads as well with a die, and those nuts go on really smoothly now. But yeah, everything came off really smoothly, which was great. I'll show you the sizing as it sits on the shop press. It is definitely possible with the 12-ton. It's a little bit close in terms of room to press, but it definitely worked pretty well. And then the other thing I wanted to show is I didn't realize I didn't show this yet, was just the wear on the bearings. I can't say whether or not this is excessive or not. It feels not great, but it doesn't look horrible. But you can see, there's a bit of movement. So I'll be curious once I get the new bearing pressed in to see how much tighter it is. But that's from the videos I've seen, that's about the amount of play that most people get. And assuming these are original bearings, there's 220,000 miles on them. So yeah, just happy that I'm doing it and wanted to show that it is indeed a little bit loose. So I'll get the other side into the press and I'm going to film that part. I just kind of wanted to make sure it worked first, and then I'll show you how it sits in the actual press itself. What I'm doing now is measuring how far I'm going to need to press the ABS ring and the top spacer back on. You need to measure the amount of this shiny bearing surface that's revealed here so that you can make sure that you press the new ones on to the same depth. So a lot of people use an Allen wrench for this. I just have my calipers here, so I'm just going to take a quick measurement, make sure I have an idea of where I need to be. And we're right at about 4.5 4 millimeters, 4.4 millimeters of space there. So that just gives me a ballpark of where I need to be for when I do the press work back on. So to get the press tool ready, I need to hammer out one stud. So I'm choosing the one near the e-brake lever here. You need to do that so you can fit the tool underneath. So I just picked up a set of brass drifts, so I'm going to use this. And I just have kind of a heavy sledge mallet here. So I'll get that punched out, and then we can get the tool set up as well. Comes with these really big, beefy washers, so that's great for holding power on these nuts. Something you'll notice, maybe if you watch Timmy the Toolman's old video, is I believe this is a new part of the kit, this bottom plate here. In Timmy's original video, he had to use a bearing splitter to essentially do this exact same thing, to put pressure on the back side of the ABS ring. So this is much nicer, much easier to use. So great that Dwayne has this included in the kit now. I can't remember how many years ago that video Timmy put out was, but this is much easier. And if you watch that video, just know that you don't actually need that bearing splitter tool now that Dwayne has this included in the kit. So here's the setup with the 12-ton shop press. So you can see we're riding real low. We are on the 5th rung down from the top for the press apron. I've got these 2 steel plates that I had bought for my wheel bearings in the front, and then the 2 that come with the Harbor Freight press. So those 2 stacked, and this is fully extended upwards, the bottle jack, and that's how much space I've got in between. So I could take up a little bit of that space with another sort of something to lift it up, but this should work at least for the first part. I can always readjust, but yeah, you don't have a lot of real estate to work with, but it should work. It worked on the other one. So just proof of concept that you can get away with the 12-ton. And in terms of pressing power, it was more than enough pressing power to get this job done. It did the same like it would do with a wheel bearing. It sort of loads up and then it releases, but no issue at all. So just know that you don't need the big 20-ton. And the reason I have the 12-ton is I have a really small shop here, and the 20-ton is significantly larger in terms of the size of it than the 12-ton. And I did both front wheel bearings and I'm doing this job, and I would imagine those are the 2 most needy in terms of press power jobs you could do, at least on these first gen Tacomas, and it did it easily. So just note, you don't need the 20-ton. If you're short on space, you could get away with the 12-ton. Obviously I had to do that modification, so I don't know, for Dwayne, I mean, I don't know how much extra strength having this 3/4 of an inch wider than it needs to be for this original press apron for the 12-ton. I don't know how much strength that adds, but it's possible that he can manufacture these a little bit more narrow, and then you wouldn't have to modify the 12-ton, and it does work, it does fit with the 12-ton. So obviously that's just a thought. It was easy enough for me to again widen the press apron, but we'll get this starting to press, and you'll see how it works. Easy, light work. There you go. 12-ton success. With the ABS ring and the top spacer out, I now have to put that stud that I removed back in. So I've got 2 of those thick washers stacked with the original nut on there, and I'm just going to drive in with my impact. And you'll know when you get there because it'll stop moving. I will admit this side fought me a lot more than the other side did. I just spent probably 15 minutes trying to get that off. Problem is the width of it with these normal C-clip pliers, you just can't get a great bite on it. So what I ended up doing was pushing on the other side. As soon as I got a little bit of a grip, I pushed on the other side. So as I got more expanded, this was going further down onto the plier, and then that worked. So, oh yeah, a little tip there. It might not go so smooth. So for the remaining spacer and the bearing, we now just slide the tool right over directly onto the studs, and this should fit flush over that, like that. Get your big washers again, then you put the original nuts on there, and you get pretty good purchase with the nuts. You get almost full coverage on the studs there. Now pressing out the bearing and the bottom spacer. I almost certainly will need to adjust this in order to get enough clearance, but that should be okay. So we'll get it freed up first. Also got these two smaller plates that I'm going to use just to add some more height. And there's that. So on the second round, only a little bit of extra height needed, but it seems like most people that use a 20 ton also, you need to adjust a little bit part way through. So that one worked good as well. Just going to pop out this dust boot now, and then we'll also pop the bearing out from the backside here. All right, we are all set up to start pressing the new stuff back in. I got all the OEM parts laid out, everything cleaned up. You can see I have the mating surface for the axle tubes really nice and cleaned out. Did brake clean throughout on the other sides as well, on the drum backing. Cleaned up the axle shafts on both sides, Scotch-Brite the bearing surfaces. So we're ready to go, and I'm going to start putting the seals in, the bearings, and the first set of spacers as well. So first up, I'm going to put these little dust boots in. Just going to put a little super lube on there. Dust seals are in, so now we can put the new bearings in. So there's this little tapered side that will sit in this little tapered area of the axle, so that has to be facing down. So I'm just going to plop these in. I cleaned it out one more time. These are not a press fit, so they might fall into place, or I might need some light convincing. I'm actually just going to put a dab of super lube just on the rim, just to make sure. It did look like we had some rust on the outer sort of wall there on the old one, so maybe this will help just keep moisture at bay. So now let's drop that in. Okay, I might need to tap that in with an old bearing. There we go. So at a certain point, that just kind of dropped into place for us. Okay, so that bearing popped out a little bit again, but that's fine. Kind of expected that to happen as I get these sort of set up here. I did put a little bit of super lube just on the surface where the bearing and the bottom spacer is going to sit. Okay, so that popped right out. I was hoping that wouldn't happen, but that's okay, because when I flip it, we'll have it upside down on the actual press. And then I'm just going to slide a couple of these spacers over with the tapered side at the top. As I'm getting ready to press on the new bearings and spacers to the axles, what I want to do first is get these inner seals replaced in the axle housing. The reason I want to do that is I'm going to need to test the depth of the ABS ring and the spacer above it by inserting it into the axle housing, giving it a spin, and then seeing where the seal is riding on the spacer to make sure that we have enough purchase to not cause a leak in the future. So before I do that, I'm just going to pull out these seals and replace them just so I have the new ones in there. I'm using a slide hammer type puller. You might be able to get a different style in there, but this seems to be the best way to try to go about it. So I'm going to try to pull from either of the, from this orientation in the top, just the way that I have the axle housing sitting on the jack stands, those are the sides. This would be the bottom, so I don't want to pull from that side so as to not mar the bottom where the oil is going to sit most regularly. I'm working on getting the new axle seals in, and just fair warning, I've already ruined 2 seals, and the reason is these are pretty difficult seals to get in for whatever reason. They're very flimsy in this sort of top area where you need to get some sort of, driver tool. So if you don't have a tool that is almost exactly the right, diameter for it, you're very likely to damage the tool, damage the seals. And I unfortunately damaged 2 of them. Luckily, my local dealer is really good, and I'm in there all the time, and he actually hooked me up with a couple of seals free of charge, so that was really nice. I just drove over there and got the new ones. So this time around, I'm using this bearing driver tool. It's not 100% perfect. It's actually oversized compared to the seal, which is good, but it just means I can't get all the way in with it. So then once I drive that in, I'm going to switch to just this press cup and then, get the edge in, because this is almost exactly the same diameter. So it worked on the other side. I successfully installed the other one without any issue. Just went really slow, so I'm going to try it on this other one now, and hopefully it goes smoothly. Okay, looks like it's working. My video cut out, but I got the seal fully seated now. After I used the bearing tool, the seal setting tool, I just used the other end of this cup and was able to get it all the way in. So you can see that it's nice and flush in there now, and I'll be able to test the axles as I get the spacers set. Here's the press setup for the pressing of the first spacer and the bearing onto the axle shaft. So the kit comes with this plate that fits over the top of the hub, which is really nice. I've got the backing plate upside down on there. The dust boot's already on. The press tool is sitting upside down on the apron, and then you've got this other tool upside down with the spacer and the bearing on top. So that'll be the setup, and that'll get the axle pressed in for the first part. So I just felt that load up. Yeah, we should be there. So I didn't even have to adjust it this time. I just barely made it, but didn't even have to adjust it. And you will know definitively that you've pressed it on far enough if you try to fit the snap ring in. So you can just use that as a feeler gauge. Just make sure that it slots into the hole, and you've got it on far enough. So I'll get the snap ring put on there now. I did buy new snap rings for these, but I imagine you could probably reuse them. But they're only a couple bucks a piece, so. I did also just want to quickly show the movement with the brand new bearing on there. So, I did the comparison when showing the wiggle room on the drum on the bearing before. Here it is with brand new. To be honest, like you can see there is movement on a new bearing still. Like the tolerance isn't perfectly tight. So I don't know, you'll have to go back and compare what it was before, but the bearings were probably in okay shape before. You can see the bearing kind of keeps sliding out of the housing, but there's still movement. So, you'll probably know if you have excessive slop just based on this. Like if you have more slop than this, probably a good time to replace. Now getting ready to press the ABS ring and the final spacer on. So just as a reminder, this is what it's going to look like upside down. The ABS ring, the flat side goes on the bottom. And then this top spacer, OEM tells you to install it with the tapered side up, but the general consensus is to install it with the tapered side down because you're getting more polished surface for the seal to ride on. So I haven't done any research on that myself, but all the videos of folks in the community tend to want to do that. So I'm going to run it with it like that. So that's the way it's set up. I've got the bearing surface greased a little bit. And with this press cup here, remember we need to have this reveal facing us because we need to know how far onto this shiny surface we're pushing it. So we want to see approximately 4.4 millimeters of bearing surface in this reveal here. So we'll keep an eye as we're pressing, but with this one we have to be careful of how far we go because we don't want to go too far, because then we're just going to have to pull everything back off, which would not be fun. So we'll get that started. Okay, so remember we're going to be watching right in this reveal here to see where the bearing surface comes up. Okay, so we're just starting to see it peek through now, so I gotta start being pretty careful here. And it kind of jumps a decent little bit every time. So I think I gotta go one more here. Okay, I'm gonna take a measurement there. Alright, so this is a 4 millimeter Allen, so I need about 4.4, and right now it is like almost perfectly 4 millimeters, so I think I need to go one more baby pull here. Which that might have been a tiny bit too much. We'll see. So I was worried I pressed it on too far, so I put a little mark on the spacer, inserted it into the right side of the axle tube, tightened down the bolts there, spun it around, and you can see I am right here on this line, which is not where I want to be. I want to be more right in the middle. So that really sucks because now I have to pound out the stud again, put in the tool underneath the ABS ring, pull this up a little bit, and then do this again. And I think it just goes to show it is difficult to do this because, when I had it set up, I wasn't quite far enough. All I did was load it up as little as I could for one more, little bit of space, and it popped all the way down. So it's like you unfortunately don't get this nice little gradual pulling when you're doing the shop press. It kind of like goes, kind of pops up and down, sometimes close to a millimeter at a time. So that really sucks because now I have to do a bunch of extra work. It's not going to be that big of a deal, but it's just something I don't want to have to do. I have to reset the press and, do it all over again. So I don't even know what to suggest. Just be careful, I guess, and hopefully you get lucky with the incremental sort of popping of your shop press. But I'd say, if anything, just play it a little safe and take it out and measure it before you go too deep like me, because now I'm going to have to redo this. So that sucks, but I'll do that off camera and then hopefully get back to the right depth here. All right, I'm getting pretty good at knocking these studs out because I had to do that not only a second time, but a third time as well. And what's interesting is the final gap that gave me pretty much an exact halfway point of where the spacer is sitting on the seal is definitely smaller than what I took off. What I took off was about 4.5 millimeters, and what I have now in this space is like 2.5 millimeters. So I'm not really sure. I think you can chalk that up to most likely slightly varying sizes of this spacer or the ABS ring itself, or slightly different seal depth. That's actually probably more likely, as the seal has changed a little bit over the years since whatever this was originally put in from the factory, and that itself is causing a little bit of difference in how deep this needs to go. But anyways, I've got it at a good spot where it's halfway down the spacer now, so I can finally move on to the other side and finish that up too. So I believe I just made an important discovery as I was just test fitting everything. Again, I had everything pressed on already. I installed this side axle into the housing, tightened it up, and I was getting a lot of resistance, and I couldn't figure out why. That side seems to be okay. The diff was spinning. I thought it was something to do with the locking mechanism, so I was playing with locking and unlocking the actuator. But what I just realized is there's an important consideration you need to make And I know why now OEM has the tapered side on the upper half. So inside the axle tube, there are these little flange pieces. You can see just beyond the seal right here, these metal pieces. They are tapered as well. And I don't know if you can see it super well. You can probably see it better on that one up there, but you see those marks there? That is from this spacer rubbing on there because I have it just a little bit too deep in. You can see the witness mark is about halfway on the spacer, so I figured, oh, that's good. It's gonna, be plenty of depth on the seal itself. But because I have it too deep and because I have the tapered side on the bottom half, this top edge of the spacer is now rubbing and causing resistance on that little piece there. So what I'm going to need to do is just press this on a tiny bit further. I must have just cleared it on that one, but I need to press this on a tiny bit further to avoid that happening. So just a note there, when you do flip this, that's the risk you're running and you need to be careful. So make sure you test fit and make sure you're not running on those little pieces of metal inside the axle tube housing. Otherwise, you're going to get unnecessary resistance. I've decided that I'm going to redo the drum brakes and hardware on both sides. The pads actually are in pretty decent shape in terms of life left in them, as are the drums. But there's just some weird uneven patterning happening. Like, this is the same on the other side, but this pad almost seems untouched compared to a new one. And then on the other side, it's sort of thinner at the bottom and then thicker at the top. So it almost seems like maybe this wasn't adjusted properly or it wasn't expanding properly. So again, just while I'm here and while I have this on the table, it's going to be a lot easier for me to do all this work. So I bought an OEM brake kit. I did buy an aftermarket spring kit only because to piece together all the OEM springs and clips and everything, it's just insanely expensive compared to, 20 bucks for an aftermarket spring kit. So I did the other side already in terms of I took everything off. Admittedly, I kind of used a bit of brute force to make it happen. It didn't go super smooth, so I'm going to see how this side goes. But yeah, it's not the easiest thing to do, and it seems like there's a few ways you can go about it. So I'm going to do my best to get this off cleanly, and then I'll start preparing the backing plate and getting the new hardware set up and the new shoes set up to reinstall. So it seems like this side is actually reverse threaded. So I'm turning this adjuster counterclockwise and it's tightening inwards. And you just have to hold back the spring retainer on the back so you can turn it that way. I did this last time too, but I forgot to plug the master cylinder, so it just squirted a little bit of brake fluid out. So I'm going to plug that up because that'll ruin the paint. I am also removing both of the wheel cylinders, but not because I'm replacing them. I'm not replacing these just yet until if they obviously don't work, I'll replace them. But just so I can clean in there a little bit better, and then I can spray the backside of this with some paint without having to mask so much stuff. So just popping these off, and I'll clean these up a little bit as well. I'm not going to get too in depth on the install process for the drum brakes because there's dozens of videos out there that do a really good job explaining how to do it. But one thing I did want to point out that I kind of just had to discover for myself that might be helpful is just the difference in the self-adjuster arm on the different models of the first gen Tacoma. So as far as I can tell, based on some of the threads on Tacoma World, is on the 03 and 04 model Tacomas, they switched the location of the parking brake to go so the cable goes below the axle housing, and on the 02 and below Tacomas for the first gen, the parking cable goes above it. So it doesn't really matter, but the point being that the self-adjuster is different on the 03 and 04s versus the other models. So on the earlier models, you'll have sort of a double stacked arm here. So this is the parking brake arm. On top of it, you'll have a second arm that comes over here and connects to the star wheel as your self-adjuster. On the 03 and 04, it's actually behind the unit and it connects or touches the little teeth behind. So just that's important for noting, the difference between your two models. I actually got really lucky because my donor axle was from an 04 and I have an 03, so it's all compatible. But the other thing I wanted to show, and let me just pause and flip this over. Okay, so this unit is flipped over now. So this is, from the back side, and this is the self-adjuster. I just wanted to show that there's this little arm here, and you have to get that behind the gold self-adjuster arm. And there's a little, you see that little nubbin there? I didn't get it behind there when I did the one side just now installing, and I could not figure out why this arm wasn't making contact with the teeth. It was kind of like offset like that, and I couldn't figure it out. But after taking a look at this one over here, I realized that I didn't have that little nubbin behind the arm. So if you have the 03, 04 type, just make sure when you're installing it and before you're installing the spring that you have that little thing behind the arm. Otherwise, it's not going to contact the star wheel and you won't have any self-adjusting. Oh, wow. There we go. So that's in. I'll obviously do all the adjustment once I get everything hooked up. I don't even have the, brake cable on, so I'll have to do a lot of adjustment. Certainly a lot of brake bleeding, all that stuff once I get onto the truck. But got all the new gear on now and should be good for the next step. I decided against buying new OEM drums because they're about $115 a piece. And these ones are actually in really good condition still. So what I ended up doing was having them turned. O'Reilly's is the only box store that I know of that still does turning. So they were 25 bucks a piece to turn. So they came out really good for 50 bucks. I basically have new rotors, but now what I'm doing is just stripping the old paint off of them. The OEM rotors come with this sort of flat black paint on them. So I'm going to strip them off, clean them up, repaint them, and then I'll basically have totally refreshed drums to put on the truck.